Welcome back, everyone. We are here for the continuation of our top 50, and this is 30 to 21. If you've been noticing, we've been changing like our drinks and our snacks each time, even though we're filming some of these on the same day. And now I have given us each a beer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. It's great. And I chose one that's a local brew. It's from Winnipeg. It's Trans-Canada Brewing Company, and it's blueberry because I love blueberries, and it has a bit. It's just really refreshing. So that's what we're drinking.
It's a nice weak beer. It's delicious.
Yeah, we're not sponsored, by the way. This is not like Trans-Canada buying their way onto our video. I just really like this beer.
Yeah. Cheers.
All right.
Thanks for bringing
Yes,
this.
exactly. Okay.
Or bringing them. It's your house.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing this to my house. All right. So I'm going to just jump right into this. I'm going to start off the pick here with my number 30 game. And it is a fairly newer game as well, but I love it so much. And I know you love it as well, but I don't know if you would have included it on your list yet. And that is Overboss. So Overboss is a game. Yeah, I love this game so much. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. And if you something to know about me in terms of my some games I like anyways is I really appreciate games that are super simple in their rules but offer a lot of variety and depth over time, so that when I'm coming back to it, and especially if it's a game that I'm going to constantly be introducing to new people, I don't want to feel like I'm getting tired of it while they are constantly enjoying their first experiences. Overboss is one that has enough variety in the different tiles that can be used in each game and the combination of certain tiles together that I will still see combinations that I've never seen before each time I play. Eventually that might run out, but so far it hasn't. And it's just like, it plays so quick. Every time we've played, I think like, it's been like anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes sometimes we can have a game. Yeah, it's a short game, but I feel like I've had so much fun. And the artwork is just something that resonates so much with me because of my history with video games and 8-bit art styles, playing with NES and Super Nintendo games and things like that, that it strikes every proper chord with me for a game that's going to stay in my collection long term and that I want to keep playing. And the first time we played, we didn't even use the bosses.
Right.
And then, and because it's
gives you an ability, right?
Yeah, and it almost makes it seem like it's a variant, whereas like that's the way to play it from the get-go.
So.
And yeah, that adds a whole other layer into it as well. I love playing this game. I love the way it looks, and this is one that I have tons of friends that group on video games that even though they don't play board games very often, if I were to bring this out, or when I have brought it out, they've been like, oh my god, what is this game? Or they've seen it on my shelf and been like, can we play that? So yeah, I'm a big fan. I was even a little bit surprised when I realized where I was going to rank this because of how new it is, but like it's one that I think is going to stick on my top 50 for a while, even if it does shift a little bit.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. I think I can't remember if I played it once or twice with you. I've enjoyed it, but I haven't loved it.
Yeah.
And I think the designer, or one of the two designers, Kevin Russ, who did Calico, spoiler alert for anyone who didn't watch the previous episodes, was earlier on my list. I do like Calico quite a bit more, but I'm definitely open to playing Overboss again.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. My number 30 is a game that has a lot of sentimental value for me. One of my maybe 7 or 8, 9th first games into the hobby is Evolution Climate. It's also one of the nicest looking games I own. The kind of watercolor artwork is just beautiful. It's also an extremely thematic game. The way it kind of simulates basically wildlife and fighting over food at a watering hole and the climate affecting the way that species have to adapt and that sort of thing. It's a very mean, very cutthroat game. One of the most cutthroat games I've ever played. You can feel like you're out of it early because people can have carnivores and come and eat your creatures or eat your species to get food, and you might feel like you just spent all these cards building up these species. It's a tableau building game. You can have up to 3 or 4 species depending on the player count. And it's just really interesting because you always it's a very tactical game because you can kind of have a strategy from the start, but depending how the climate shifts to hotter or colder, or what other species other players have, or what cards come up, you constantly have to be adapting to what's in front of you. You can't play this heads down just saying, oh, this is going to be my strategy for this game, because if you don't react to what's going on, you're just going to get absolutely destroyed. And it's a game that I've at times lost horribly, at times I've won. There's been really close games, and because everyone keeps their food secret in this pouch until the end of the game, there's this interesting end game reveal where as long as you don't know someone did super well, you never really know who's going to win till the end. And I've had a few really memorable games of this. One in particular with my sister-in-law where I thought I was very comfortably in the lead, and she changed the weather in the last season to super hot, and it wiped out all my species. I lost so many points, and she won by 3 points, and we just both sat there kind of jaw dropped being how did that happen? It's an awesome game that has gone, if we had done this list a while back, it might have even been in my top 10. It's gone down because the last couple times I played it, I didn't quite enjoy it quite as much, especially because when you play with newer people, it's harder for them to get into for the first time.
Yep.
But yeah, so thematic and such an interesting game, and it has influence of actual like nature, like specialists and like people who study this stuff for a living have had a big hand in the design of the game. So it's just a really cool game that I think everyone should at least try. Yeah, that's Evolution Climate.
Nice. Yeah, it's a really popular one, but it's one that I don't know why, but for some reason doesn't hit the right chords with me to want to play it very often. Like, I've played it a few different times, I think 3 or 4 times at least with you, and for some reason something about it doesn't want to draw me back. And it's funny because I even actually enjoy Oceans more than when I played Oceans for the first time. I remember thinking I remember being surprised, being like, this is landing with me more than Evolution Climate is for some reason. And I cannot put my finger on what it is, because I appreciate everything about the design, and I think it does so many things that are unique compared to other board games I've played, but something about it isn't like, I'm never excited to play Evolution Climate. Even though I'll have a good time, it's never one that I'm going to be choosing. And I don't know what it is. Maybe I just have to have one of those like, light bulb games with it, where all of a sudden I'm like, oh my god, the beauty of this strategy, like right. I get it, and I just haven't had that yet. But yeah, I understand why it's on your list though. It's not. I thought it was even going to be higher than it is, so I'm not surprised at all.
Fair enough. Yeah. And that's the thing to what you said. It's not consistently amazing. Sometimes it's just good, but it's the amazing times I've had with it that made it rank this high on the list.
Yeah, fair. My number 29 is a very small game, but I love it to death, and that is The Mind.
Nice.
Yeah, The Mind is just such a brilliant little game. I was surprised by how much I loved it when I first played it, and it's a game that almost you question sometimes, like where is the game in it? Like the mechanics are there, but it just seems so simple. Like if I explain it to someone, that at first glance they're like, I don't understand how this is going to be fun, because it's just like you have a hand of cards, you have to play cards in ascending order. That's essentially the game. The genius, of course, comes from the fact that we can't tell each other what's in our hands. So then someone will ask me, well, so you're really just playing a guessing game then, right?
Yeah, how do I know what I'm supposed to play?
Yeah, and that's really that's the crux of it. You don't know until you start to get the tendencies of everyone around the table. And the thing that The Mind does so brilliantly that I have yet to really have captured in another game is that it makes it so that every single time I play the game, who I play it with changes the rules of the game, kind of. And what I mean by that is, like, the rules when I play with you might be, we're going to be very slow, methodical, and like really calculated. And suddenly that is like a really different way to play The Mind. And then all of a sudden I'll play with another friend of mine who it's like, they're throwing down numbers with like nothing. I'm like, whoa. Like,
when we played Corbin and Brad, and Corbin threw out like number 15, like 1 second into the round, and we're like, what?
Yeah, like what if someone had the 3? What if someone had the 5? Like, so
yeah, we're way more cautious. For sure,
so the way that you play with different people around the table is so drastically different that you have to play multiple times usually. And the first time you play is about learning everyone's tendencies. And when you actually learn it, you feel like you leave a game knowing the person better from how they approach a game, but sometimes how you approach a game says a lot about your personality and about you as in life in general. And so this is why I put it on the first date video that we did, best games for a first date, because I played this game 3 times now on 3 different first dates, and every single time I learned more playing The Mind than probably having a conversation sometimes, because you realize like how quick someone has to play this, or how they want to wait for you first, or they don't want to take the lead, or whether they're okay to fall. Like there's just so many different things that come out of it. It's just so much fun, and it's a game that I really can't properly convey why it resonates so much with me until you just have to experience it yourself. It's super inexpensive. I would highly recommend getting it and just trying it out with a group, and I think the genius slowly comes out after you play it a couple of times.
Yeah. Honestly, it's an amazing game, and I think we were both like totally fascinated with it when it first came out.
Yeah.
And I think I cooled on it for 2 reasons. One is that I haven't played it with as many different people as you.
Oh, okay.
And the second thing is we beat it with 2 or I don't remember if we beat it the 2 of us or with a group of 4. And once we beat it, I felt a bit less desire to go back to it. Right. So it's one of those ones like I never suggest we should play The Mind like when I come over here.
Yeah.
But every time we play it, I love it. It's such a cool game. There's nothing quite like it out there.
Yeah, for sure. That's The Mind, number 29.
Nice pick. Mm-hmm. Okay. My number 29 is a fairly new game, and one that you might be surprised to see on this list, because I've only played it once so far, but I enjoyed it so much in the one play I had.
Yeah.
And it is Cosmic Frog.
Wow, okay.
Yes. So
Huge.
Cosmic Frog is a 2 to 6 player game. I've talked about it on the channel a couple other times before, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview, but it's a very interactive game where you're basically an immortal frog harvesting shards of land off the planet, which is like the terrain that your frogs are on, and you're trying to then stash these land in your gullet, jump into the ether, and disgorge these into your interplanetary vault. Players can steal.
How did you remember this? It's like you memorized. Like I would never memorize all this stuff.
It's such a. The thing is, it's such a memorable game. It's just totally stuck with me because I can't think of one game I would compare this to. It's so unique and so unlike a lot of the games I normally gravitate towards, but I had such a blast playing it. It's just totally chaotic. You have to go in knowing, like, it's not that the best player is always going to win or whatever, but there's, like, special abilities, and every time there's, like, I can't remember what it's called. There's, like, something happens where the board changes and everyone has to get rid of their current abilities and, like, basically morph and get a new ability. So there's all these unknowns that happen that just, like, the game is total chaos, and you're stealing land out of people's gullets and kicking them into the ether and robbing their vaults, and like it's absolutely insane, but it's so much fun, and I can't wait to play it again with more players. I played it only once with 4 players, and like I said, it goes up to 6, and apparently plays amazingly with 5 or 6 players. There's nothing like it. It might go a lot higher on my list, or it could be that after a few more plays it drops down, but as of now, it just really stuck with me, and I absolutely loved it, so that's why it's at number 20. What is it, 29? 29, Cosmic Frog.
I haven't played it, so that's why it's not on here, but I am so curious and eager to play based on what you said.
I think you're going to like it a lot.
Yeah, awesome pick. All right, number 28 for me, and I think this will be on your list somewhere. 28 is Renature. So Renature is a newer-ish game. I think it's 2020. It's a great game, and it has that beautiful aspect to it where it looks really pretty and beautiful and ends up being very cutthroat and mean at times. It is a domino placement game where each side of the domino has a different animal on it, or sometimes 2 of the same animal, and you're having to connect, like dominoes, the same animal to the same animal, but it goes far beyond that because you're also having to, it's like got area majority where you're, surrounding areas that you are then placing different tree and bush tokens into, and whoever has the most in there is going to win the territory, win the area, but each one you place can be worth different value. So a big tree is worth 4, whereas a little tiny bush or a shrub or whatever it is worth 1. And so the genius comes into like realizing how many spaces are left in an area you're trying to control, trying to think who's going to place there based on what's left on their board. There's the neutral tokens that, neutral doesn't belong to anyone, but it can skew the results on who's going to win. Neutral can win a territory, and you can use neutral to steal something for your opponent, but not have to win it for yourself. There's actually a lot going on here, and it's one of the, out of a lot of the games on the list, it's one of the ones that I have yet to have a bad game with. Like, I every time we've played this, I've left going, oh, what a great game. Like, I really like it, and I think it's one that could climb higher over time. The more I played it, just now has been a while since I have played it, but I've also enjoyed it at every player count. I haven't played with 4, but 2 and 3, right. I've loved both. So I'm curious, 4 might feel like too much, but maybe 3 is the sweet spot, but it's such a great experience, and it's one that I think it's a joint copy that we share. Yeah. And I'm almost tempted to just get my own because I just like always want to have it in my collection, because anytime someone comes over, it's one I would absolutely recommend.
Yeah, I was gonna say we should just split another copy, so we each have one, because it's something I never want. Like, if you ask to borrow it, I'm gonna be reluctant to give it over to you. Yeah, I'll have a lot more to say about it because it's higher on my list, and I realize I expect it to be higher on your list, but now I'm remembering that I have played it 2 or 3 more times than you.
So that is Renature.
I'll have a lot more to say about that later. All right, number 28 on my list is a game called Galaxy Trucker. Nice. So this might be the only real-time game on my list. I can't remember right now, or at least the only one where like real-time is a big portion of it. And it's a game that I recently decided to cull, first off because I've played the app version so many times, and also because at the time they were talking about coming out with this newer, kind of more refined version. So I'll probably eventually pick this game up again. So fun. Plays over 3 rounds, and each round has 2 phases. One where the real time is you're basically grabbing tiles from... I shouldn't be doing this because you're only supposed to use the one hand and it's the same one. So definitely, if someone's doing this, they're cheating. You're basically grabbing a tile, flipping it over, seeing what it is, and then you either put it back in the middle or you add it to your spaceship or your little reserve. First person, you're racing. First person to win their space or complete their spaceship can say, I'm out of the round. They take this little token. Once everyone's done, you basically go on an adventure where you reveal cards from this deck, and you might go to a planet, or you might encounter space pirates, or whatever happens. You're facing these different obstacles, and whoever is like ahead in space gets kind of first crack at it. You play over 3 rounds. One of the things I love about this game is like the chaos of people's ships getting destroyed. Like, I don't care like how well I do when I play this game because it's just amazing. Like it's so much fun no matter what, and it's just like the 3 rounds escalate because every round you're building a bigger ship.
Right.
And throughout the round you can also take time, like instead of building your ship, you can take time off and look at some of the cards that are in the adventure deck to know what's coming. So then you can adjust and like, oh, based on this, I want to add more rockets or I want to add more batteries because I'm going to need to power this stuff up. Such a fun game. One that I've had so much fun playing, and it actually says in the rules that everyone wins as long as you made at least $1. It just says, so what if those bozos made more money than you? You had a good time or something like that.
It's about
so
the
it's
experience.
just it's just a fun laid back game for everyone playing. That's Galaxy Trucker.
I've only ever played this once, and it's been such a long time that I just need to play it more, and I'm sure that I will over time. I've considered actually getting the new version that came out because I remember enjoying it. But
And it's like $25 or $30 for the new one, which is a steal for this game, honestly.
Yeah, solid pick. All right, number 27 on my list is a game that I think is, well, I know is not on your list, but I think is one that you would say that you've enjoyed your plays with, that you just haven't played it enough, and that is Emotep. Emotep is one that I forget constantly how much I like this game until I go back to it, because for some reason it's one I never suggest very often until we're struggling and I say, oh, well, you haven't played Emotep in a while, or we're bring games to the cabinet. I'm like, oh, Carlo hasn't played this recently. And then when I play it, I go, man, the decisions on like, when I'm going to move one of the boats over to one of the spots, even if the boat's not full, just to be able to like make sure I get to this spot because I'm worried that someone else is going to move another boat there. And the fact that you can take your entire turn just to move a boat and not place one of your stones on it, and then realize that when that docks, even the order they come out in, the first person who comes out is going to be able to pick a card before the next person. Like, there's actually a lot going on in it that I always forget about. And each board also has a second side that, because they go so long between plays, sometimes I never played the B-sides.
Like the advanced side.
Yeah, and the B-sides are actually great too. So I've actually really, really liked my plays with Emotep, and it's another game I have rarely ever had an experience. I'm like, oh, that didn't feel like a good session. Like, I really enjoy it, and there's a 2-player version called Emotep Duel or something like that that I really want to try, because I play this most often as a 2-player game, and I wonder, but I've enjoyed it more when I played it with 3 or 4,
right.
And I wonder if the duel is sort of like the way to play it with 2, and because they realize a lot of people are playing with 2. Regardless, it's a really solid game, and one that I'm going to make a concerted effort to just suggest more often, bring to the table more, because I feel like a lot of people that I play games with don't think about Emotep, or I don't have a lot of memories with it because I'm the only one who owns it and I don't suggest it enough. Right. But I feel like you've only played it maybe twice, maybe even only once.
No, minimum twice, maybe even 3 times, but it's always like a year or two apart. Yeah, and then we never go back to it.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a game I'm going to request to play, but every time I play it, I'm like, yeah, that was surprisingly good.
But when we played it last time at the cabinet, I remember when we finished, you're like, I forgot. Like, you said something along the lines of like, that was really fun. I forgot how much like strategy there was.
Honestly,
here.
I didn't even expect this one to make your list because this is your, I think, 3rd Phil Walker Harding game on the list now.
Yeah.
And I thought you would have had Gizmos and Sushi Go Party above it. And what's interesting is a lot of Phil Walker Harding's games are not very mean, but this is a really mean game because you're literally always doing stuff that just wrecks your opponent's strategy. You see what someone wants to do and you think that's going to be way too good, I can't let them do it. And then you move the boat and they're like, you never get done what you want to do in this game.
It is pretty mean, but in the best way possible.
Yeah.
So that's
interesting pick. I did not see that one coming.
Yeah.
Okay, number 27 on my list. Now is where you can get angry at me, because number 27 is A Feast for Odin.
What a disaster.
This is a game that...
I mean, I'm happy. It should have been in your top 25, but I'm happy it's at least in the 3rd video that we're doing.
Yeah, and you know what? When I did my initial Pub Meeple rankings, I think it was at like number 22 or 23, but then as I looked at it, there were a couple other games that I just thought, I do like this game more, so... I did move it down. It could move up, could move down in the future. It's been a while now since we've played. It's a game that I think works best. I enjoy it by far most at 2 players. I haven't played it solo. I imagine solo is still pretty good because you're mostly doing your own sort of puzzle anyways. But having the 2 players, there is still a bit of player interaction in the game. With 3 or 4, like with 4, I feel like it would be too long. With 3, it adds a decent amount of playtime, but the interaction, it makes the worker placement spots at least a little more competitive.
Right.
I love the kind of aspect of covering up everything and trying to generate your income. There's just a couple things that prevent me from liking this game more. One is that I always compare this to Agricola, right? Because, we're going to eventually do an Agricola versus Feast for Odin video one day. And in Agricola, the cards play such an important role, and when you play a card, you almost always use it, or if you don't, it kind of punishes you for having wasted the action to play the card. Whereas in a Feast for Odin, I find a lot of the time the cards that I have in front of me at the end of the game, sometimes I just played them to get the point or the 2 points on them, and I didn't actually use the ability, because you're drawing them late in the game sometimes, so you can't always plan your strategy. You might draw a card that doesn't have anything to do with what you're doing, but you have a free card action to play sometime later, so you're like, I'll just play this because it gives me a point or whatever. What else? I don't know. There's a lot of spaces on the board too, so sometimes you're like looking at like 60 spaces at the beginning of the round or however many it is, and you're like, where do I even go? Yeah. There's a lot to like. Oh, also, why do your Vikings eat silver? Or why are they okay with eating silver? We've always.
I mean, that's a joke we say. Clearly, they're using the silver to buy food at the market.
It didn't say anywhere in the rules that they go to a market. Just there is no market to visit. Yeah. If they don't have the food, you can just.
There's a market. There's a market space on the board.
So why don't you have to go to the market to convert your silver into food then?
You know what?
They just eat. You put the silver.
I'm trying
my
best
food.
Not to give you a hard time for its placement, but you're making it really hard with a lot of these criticisms here.
Apparently, Vikings love the taste of silver. It's a game that is very, very fun because of the sandbox nature.
Yeah.
So I always have so much fun playing it, but I find myself while playing it being frustrated at certain things about it and being like, I wish this wasn't in it, or I wish this wasn't in it. And the spots that have dice rolling feel a bit weird. It's such a long game, and to go hunting or whaling and have bad dice rolls is not satisfying, so I tend to avoid those spots a lot. Yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot of different avenues to explore, though. It's an amazing game to try for sure, and one that I'll be happy to play. I'm sure we'll play this a lot more over our lives.
And I won't say anything about my thoughts on it here because it'll definitely come up later. But I will say that I think we both need to play this with the Norwegians expansion.
Yes.
Because I've heard that in the way that's modular for player count is the best way to experience that, especially for like 2 players. It reduces the amount of spaces. So that's something I definitely want to try and see if it changes our. Same with Prelude for Terraform Mars. I'm curious about it.
So. I've heard some people say it's not a necessary expansion, but it's like a way better game with it. So this could go way higher on my list in the future if we play it with the expansion. Yeah. But yeah, that's a Feast for Odin.
Nice. I will talk about it later. Well, not nice. It should have been higher, but I'll talk about it later. So my number 26 is Patchwork. So you already had this one on your list. It comes in higher for me. It's not the highest polyomino, but it is a game that I love. I come back to very, very often. It's one of the most played games in my collection, even when I've been playing the rules incorrectly.
I was gonna say.
And now that I've been playing the rules correctly the last time, I appreciate it even more. But even with that rule incorrectly, I still never had a bad game of Patchwork, and it is one that's just so easy to introduce to people, and every single time I pull it out, they're like, oh, like it's just such a relaxing theme, like the quilt. Like it's the amount of times I played this like on a balcony in Portugal. I played this, on a balcony in my apartment. I played this in the living room. I played it's just like this game that you can take in almost any environment, and it just suddenly feels like you're just it's the one you want to play with like a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and just like relax. And it's even though it can be like mean at times and stealing each other's like patches and everything like that, it just feels fun to sort of work on this Tetris-like board and try to complete it as best you can. It's easy for people to wrap their heads around. And I played with someone recently who said, and I introduced them, said, I'm going to do really bad this game because I don't have a lot of spatial awareness. And they beat me with them getting a score of 23 and me getting -5. And it just goes to show that you don't necessarily have to have good spatial awareness to enjoy Patchwork and be good at it, because a lot of it comes not only from spatial awareness, but just on when to choose certain tiles, and also how best you're managing your button economy, which in that session she did a lot better than I did.
And your time, how much time you have,
for sure.
It's such an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, so I won't say a lot more because you covered it already, but it is a fantastic game, and that is 26 for me.
Nice. Okay, a bit higher than I expected to rank on your list, but I'm not saying it's not deserved, especially if you played it by the right rules.
Yeah.
Number 26 on my list is a game that unfortunately doesn't get played as often as I would like for whatever reason. People seem to never suggest it at my place. This is Isle of Skye. This is an awesome tile-laying game that combines tile-laying with auctions, with bidding basically. You have a little screen, you're drawing tiles from a bag, you're putting sort of monetary amounts behind your screen for these tiles, and then you're revealing them, and basically you go around the board buying people's tiles, and any tiles that people don't buy from you because maybe you set the price too high, you have to pay the price. So if I set a tile's price at 3 or whatever, let's say higher at 7, and no one wants to buy it, not only am I losing the 7 that I put there, but I have to pay another 7 or do you just pay the 7 that you put out there? I can't remember. But either way.
But
if someone's buying it from you, you get your money back with what they paid. So you're how badly do you want a tile, or if a tile is valuable to everyone at the table, it's that kind of valuation of what do I set the price of it so that I can get it for myself, or so that I can make sure someone pays me. Because if you set the price too high and no one takes it, then you're stuck with the tile and you have to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
And it has these varying scoring conditions every game, and they trigger in different rounds, so the timing of when you put tiles where. It's a really interesting game, and something that every time I play it, I love it, but for some reason it just doesn't get played often enough. And it has that rare thing, a lot of tiling games only go up to 4 players. This one plays up to 5.
Yeah.
It's such a fun game, and one that I really want to play more, because there's so much variety from game to game, but for whatever reason it just doesn't hit the table often enough.
I think the biggest revelation of the last year for me has been how much I realized I love auction games.
Yeah.
And I think it was something that I always... I enjoyed these games, never clued into the fact that they are all have these auction mechanics. But after playing like things like Modern Art and some other ones we've played as well, I've clued into how much I enjoy it. And then I go back and think, well, yeah, and I loved Atlas Sky, but maybe I was thinking I was enjoying it more from the tile lane and not realizing that the parts where I'm laughing and having the most fun is trying to be like, what am I going to set the price at and everything. Like that's so much fun. And the fact that, like you said, the conditions, the scoring conditions change in each stage and are constantly fluctuating. Every game has felt a little bit different too. So you're absolutely right. Like every time we've gone back and played it, it's been great. And I remember one time we sat down to play a session, and the third person we were playing with, one of your friends, suggested it. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, I would have rather have played another game instead of like one of these.
He was with Patrice, and he had never even played it before. He's like, we should try the game. It looks kind of cool.
And then when we start playing, I'm like, what am I talking about? Like, I forgot how much I love this game. Yeah. But you're right. Something about it never is like the first go-to. And we just have to start including it more often because it is such a fantastic game.
Yeah. And I like that there's a big bag of tiles and you only go through like maybe at most half the tiles. And there's a lot of variety in what you see on the tiles. So even from game to game, you never know what to expect is going to come up. So yeah, changes the dynamic every time. I've said enough about it. That is Isle of Skye.
Great pick. All right, my number 25 is a game called The Quest for El Dorado. So this is a fantastic game that honestly was in my collection for a while before I even really started to appreciate it. I feel like it was the same thing with Lost Cities. There's a couple games that I got, played, enjoyed, and then it wasn't until you played them and also were like, hey, this is a really good game, and then I started to hear more about that I started to really appreciate it. And this is one of them. It plays good almost like at every player kind of done. It's a racing game with deck building, which again, combined deck building with other genres always is a win for me. It always ends up being close. I've rarely had a game where someone's really far behind because you can start to like thin your deck or acquire other cards to look at the terrain and decide this is what I need to be able to catch up or to pull ahead. The board layout changes every time you play, and you can actually do a fully custom one. You can, if you want to just say, let's lay it out this way, you can, or you can follow one of the pre-designed ones that they rank as beginner advanced. The deck building is super easy to get into. If you're wanting to introduce someone to deck building, there's almost no better place to start than the Quest for El Dorado because it's a small deck. The cards are super simple, and it introduces the concept of when you buy a card, it doesn't immediately go into your hand, things like that, it's good to understand with deck builders. But it's just so addictive. Like, everything you're doing is looking at the board and saying, okay, I need to get through the next 3, I'm going to need some, the sailor to be able to cross the water, so I'm going to have to buy one now. But then later on in the game, I might not need that sailor, so now I'm going to try to get to this spot to thin that deck out, or I'm going to, acquire some of these ability cards to counteract that. Everyone has a different strategy. Often when we play, you're thinning out your deck really early and really thin, whereas, I tend to like build mine up more and thin out just specific cards, and yet we always end up very close still. Like, it all is viable. There are like 2 expansions available. I don't even have the expansions, and I enjoy this game immensely, but with the expansions, I'm sure it even adds more longevity and variety to it. I'm pretty confident this is on your list. And it hasn't come up yet, so it shows that you even like it more than me, unless I'm wrong. But yeah, it's just a game that I would highly recommend. And again, if you're a deck building fan, I know people who love deck building who reached out to me when I was starting to talk about this game and said, oh, I'd never heard about this game. And just the fact that they love deck building, they immediately picked it up, and now it's like one of their favorite games. So that is the Quest for El Dorado. I can't say enough good things about it. You should definitely try it if you haven't.
Yeah, I will have more to say about it sooner than you might think.
Right now.
No, not quite. But number 25 on my list is another game that uses deck building, and as of now is probably my second highest ranked deck building game. The highest ranked game from 2021 on my list, Theum. Or it might be pronounced, I don't know if it's Fam or Fiam.
Right.
But,
wow, that is high. That is a big surprise for me.
And here's the thing. I've only played it once, but I was so impressed by this game the first time, and like, if I were to have more game nights in the near future, it's one of the games that I want to play again the most right now. I can't wait to explore this game more. The deck building aspect of it is awesome. You have this shared board that you're kind of playing on, but everything you build on this board belongs to the Pharaoh, which is not any of the players. So anything you build doesn't belong to anyone. It just belongs to the land, and you're basically building up. If you've played a game, we haven't actually played Concordia, but I know it uses the same system, and so does Century Golem, where you have cards, and you can buy cards from the market that go into your hand, and you play them, but then eventually you have to use like a rest action. In this case, it's called administration, to take your cards back. But you can only take back the top 3 cards of your deck. Otherwise, you have to pay more money to take more cards back. The cards come out in a different order. The way the game end triggers with these natural disasters coming out, the way the board changes and what combos you want to build in your deck depending on what other people are doing. I just had I kept having these light bulb moments while playing the game, being like, oh, so if they're going to do that, then I got to kind of shift what I'm doing. Or like, oh, I can abuse this combo, but only for so long until there's no more spots on the board to do this. So I can't just rely on the same thing for a long time. So it's a game that, who knows, it could end up falling lower on my list in the future. It could end up going higher. It's really up in the air, but for how much it impressed me off just one play, I had to have it this high up on the list. I generally love most Freedom and Freeze games I try. He does a lot of cool stuff in his games. A lot of the time they have these little flaws here and there, but I really admire how like creative he is with his designs, and this is the highest ranked game from him on my list. I can't wait to play this game more.
It's one that I had not even heard of, or if I had it, it had gone right over my head until you bought it and I saw it on your shelf. So when you suggested to play it, I was like, yeah, like I'm down to try a game, but I have no idea what I'm getting into, nor would I have suggested this if you didn't.
Right.
And then I played it and immediately it not only clicked, I said, how did I not know about this game? Because it maybe didn't resonate as much for me as you off one play,
right.
But if I play this a handful more times, I'd be surprised if it wasn't in contention for my top 50.
Yeah.
Because it is a really, really good game, and it does some really genius things that, like you said, maybe other games do and we just haven't played them, like Concordia and stuff. But in experiencing them in this format, I left that session going, that was a ton of fun, and there was a lot of strategy I had to go through for it. So
yeah, the only 2 barriers I would say from the first play were that it took a while, probably took over 2 hours, and I hope that it gets to more between the 1.5 to 2 hour range. If it goes over 2 regularly, that'll be a bit of a drawback for me, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing is there's a lot of checking the glossary for what the cards do at first, because they just have symbols, so it's all like, oh, what does that card do? What does that card do? But that's why I want to play it more soon, so that we kind of internalize that and then kind of develop a meta with our group.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think it's a game that's going to reward repeated plays, and we'll definitely have more content for it on the channel in the future.
Nice. All right, my number 24 is, might surprise you a little bit that it's this high, but I love it, and that is Stellar. This is a fantastic 2-player game that, honestly, the most surprising thing about this for me is that I did not research this game. I did not know about it. I was literally at a local game store here in Winnipeg and just thought maybe I'll pick up a game, saw it on the shelf, thought I remembered seeing a post about it, and the artwork was really striking, and I really liked the style of it. Looked at the back and thought, yeah, I could use another 2-player game. This looks cool. Picked it up, and it's somehow become one of my favorite games, and now we have Sub-Astral and everything, and love those designers now from having picked that game up. Didn't even know about them before that. So it's a fantastic game, and it's fantastic because it makes you make really tough decisions every single time you play. I've never had an easy game of Stellar, and yet rewards you or punishes you based on the decisions you make. So every decision of the 11 turns that is all you get feels really crucial. So if you're someone who doesn't like the idea of like every turn is important, you don't have to like ever relax, maybe you're not going to like this, but every single turn I decided, okay, if I do this, but he might take this, and if I do this, I also have to take this, which I don't really want. That's going to block this. So you can't do everything you want. You can't play the perfect game of Stellar, unless it's very difficult to do so. But it makes it for the scores very interesting and very close because of that, or not always very close, but like very competitive, I should say. And it's just punishing in the best way, where it makes anytime I've had a bad game or a bad score, it's only made me want to play it more or play it again to try to do better than it has been to like make me gravitate away from the game. So it's one I constantly bring out when I feel like I'm playing with someone who's okay with that sort of mean aspect or just really thinky, difficult aspect. And it also, really the only downside that I have the entire game, and it's not really a huge one, it's just it takes up a lot of table space for a little card game, because you have to build out this whole like telescope thing. But besides that, I enjoyed every single time, and I feel like the last few times we've played it, we've left just being surprised by like, wow, I forgot how much I enjoyed that, or wow, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed it. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's a great game. Doesn't quite make my list, but in the future it could. I've only played it twice, and it's always big gaps between when I play it. But it's a brilliant game, and probably one of the heaviest games in terms of like a small box card game and what it makes you think about. But it's a really good game.
Yeah, that's stellar number 24.
All right, my number 24 is The Quest for El Dorado, which you just had at 25. So I don't need to say anything else about how the game plays. I will just say the reason it is my favorite deck builder as of now. I had to have it slightly ahead of Fayum in the deck building sort of area just because I've only played Fayum once.
Yeah.
The Quest for El Dorado is brilliant. I love how quick it plays, how when you play with 2 players, each player has 2 characters on the map, so there's a lot of blocking involved, and a lot of the choke points on the map. Like, I love how from the very start of the game, something that I used to like a lot, like, I've moved on from Catan a long, long time ago, but my favorite part about Catan was looking at the map at the start and coming up with a plan. And I love that aspect of this game because you have to look ahead and think, where are the choke points where only one character can get through? What type of cards am I going to need? How am I going to basically navigate this map? And you have to come up with this plan, but then you still have to adjust along the way when someone blocks you or you see someone pull ahead and they start getting these tiebreakers or whatever. And you hinted to the fact that, like, in deck building games, I always love deck destruction, like thinning out my deck.
Yeah.
So those cave spots where you have to stop and you can trash a card, but then if you want to do it again, you have to leave and come back. There was one game where I literally let you go ahead to, like, I think it was the 3rd tiebreaker spot and get all the... You went so far ahead, and I was just sitting there going back and forth trashing cards. And you were, like, laughing because you're like, you're going to be so far back. And ended up catching up, and we got to the end at the same time, and obviously you did win on the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
But I think you were a little bit surprised that, like... And I love that dynamic of, like, you can fall behind to get a more efficient deck, or when do you want to power ahead to get those tiebreakers? It's just such a fun system.
And it's not... The caves are the ones that give you the extra tiles. It's the red spots.
You're right. Sorry, you're right.
But the interesting thing of what you say is that also depends on how you've laid out the boards, right? Because sometimes you might have it where, like, the good spot to do a whole bunch of trashing is midway through suddenly, and the time we played it was right at the beginning. So that's also interesting because even someone with your strategy who says, like, I'm going to trash early, maybe you get a board setup that says, well, unfortunately, I'm going to have some sort of a deck before I trash later on, but now you have your eye on that, right?
Yes,
so, and maybe I put one of my guys on that, and then only with the other guy just block. Like, there's things you can... It's a pretty interesting game.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And I love that the cards are mostly multi-use, so even the ones that seem basic and simple, like those gold ones, it's like you can use them to move through certain regions, or you can use them to spend to buy cards. And then even the other cards, you can use 2 of one kind as $1 to buy cards. So there's always different, how much do I want to move versus how much do I want to buy cards? Like, every single turn is interesting in that game. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it is such a great game. I knew it was going to be on your list, but I didn't realize we were going to do one.
Yeah, I think that's the closest one we've had in terms of spot on the list so far.
Yeah, awesome pick. All right, my number 23 is a game that I'm pretty sure is going to be on your list based on some comments you made in a previous video, and that is Newsfjord. So this is not the best Uwe Rosenberg game.
Absolutely not.
Right. It's not the second
best. It's just the best one that you own.
Wait, maybe for me it is the second best Uwe Rosenberg. No, it's not. I think this is the 3rd best Uwe Rosenberg game.
What?
Maybe. I can't remember now the order of my list. But anyways, it's not the best one. But Newsfjord is a really great big box Uwe Rosenberg game. I really love it. I feel like I appreciated it more and more the more I played it. And I recently played it solo for the first time, which is actually really good that they did. And the reason I did that was because I've heard a lot of people talk about the solo mode for Newsfjord, and it surprised me because you hear of, like, oh, the best solo games, and you often hear of, like, there's certain ones you hear of Marvel Champions, and you hear of Spirit Island and different things like that. But I don't often expect to hear about Uwe Rosenberg big box game. It's like, oh, the solo mode is really good.
Especially when it's worker placement, because you're like, what am I competing with? What's going on here?
And it was actually really good. So it reminded me how much I love it. It reminded me how, like, tough the decisions are with you only have 3 worker placement discs and you're fighting for some of the same spots, that how many times you've taken a spot, especially with the stocks and that you're doing. There's so many times where it's like, if I go there, I know he's going to go to this one, and that makes me laugh as I'm playing. The cards that come out that we're fighting for are different every game because there's the different fish decks you can use, and which ones come out and which ones other people are going for. And
some are secret until the end.
I was going to say the secret ones. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I know I'm going to be the one going for this. Next thing you know, I put it on and I realize that it's actually now you're going to fight me for something that was in my hand as a secret. So, like, there's a lot that going on here that I forget sometimes how good this game actually is. Again, it's not my favorite Uwe Rosenberg big box game, and I feel like there's some that if I had played Converna, if I had played
Le
Havre, that's the one I was wanting to say. There's a good chance that maybe those end up bumping this one later on the list, and I think that's very possible. But as of now, for the ones I played, I'm pretty confident of its spot here at 23, and it honestly could have even been a little bit higher, and I don't think you would have batted an eye.
No.
It's a very, very solid game.
I just realized which other one you have higher, and I'm so... Never mind.
You don't know.
Yeah, I do. I know exactly which one you have higher that I wasn't thinking of before, and that's a real shame to say that's a game better than New Fjord. Anyways, I'll have more to say about New Fjord later.
That's New Fjord, 23.
All right. My number 23 game is a very small box game that's been around for a long time. I think it came out in either early 2000s or something like that. I only discovered in the past year thanks to Board Game Arena, and then bought a physical copy. That is Coloretto.
Oh, okay.
Such a satisfying little filler game. It seems like when I read about it years ago, I thought it sounded kind of dry and boring and too simple or whatever. And when I played it, it was one of those games I've talked a lot about, and you have as well. We talk about how we like games that do a lot with a little bit. And this is a deck of cards that just has different colored chameleons. They don't have abilities. It's literally just different colors, and it's just sort of a set collection game where you're looking at cards and adding them to different rows on the board, or taking a row. Once you've taken a row from the board for that round, you're out. Game plays over a different number of rounds every time, depending on when the end game card comes out. But of all the colors you have at the end, you only score positive points for your 3 highest colors that you have the most cards of, and then everything else is negative points. So you're always trying to decide which row to take, where you might take cards that might, get negative points for you later, or where to add a card to a row to hurt certain opponents. You have to always try and guess, like, if I put this here, who's going to take it? Is that going to benefit them? There's push your luck elements. We've played this probably on Board Game Arena maybe 20, 30 times. The physical copy I've already played as well 10, 20 times. Everyone I show it to, it ends up being one of the most highly requested, like, quick filler games. When we did our filler games video, I think I said this was my number 2 at the time. Yeah. Still is probably my number 2 or 3 filler game. It's amazing, and I'm so glad I finally checked this out. You can get this for like $10. You can't go wrong. If you haven't tried it, just try it on Board Game Arena. I'm sure most people will at least appreciate it if it doesn't, maybe you might not love it as much as me, but it just seems like a game that has endless replay value, even though it doesn't do anything that different. It just has this addictive feel, and everyone has a chance to win. I don't know. I love Coloretto. I really appreciate the simplicity of it.
Yeah, I knew this was going to be high up on your list, or like at least in this range. It's not on my list, but I think I just need to play it more. I've loved it every time I've played it. It was just hard to include with some other games that I need to consider. But it's tons of fun for how, you're right, for how little is involved with it. It has amazingly difficult decisions, and usually the scoring comes right down to the wire and involves having to block other people to pretend you end up with decisions being like, I can block this person from the win, but would that help me? Like, it's just there's some really interesting decisions we've had to make when we play with like 4. I think we've even played with 6.
At 5, it goes up to 5 max.
5,
yeah.
Right.
But yeah,
we've played at 5. We played the max
absolutely,
a few times.
For sure.
It's been really good at the max. So not every game you can say that for. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Great. I expected it to be on your list, but like in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah, no, it's not going to make my list, but again, I would not be surprised if this cracks the list in a future year.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Number 22 is a newer game that I've played a whole bunch of times and I absolutely love, and that is My City. My City is a great polyomino game. I'm so happy this game came into our lives, into our board game world. We played the entire campaign, which was, how many games did we play of it?
24.
24 games of My City, so we played this a whole bunch. I can confidently say that it deserves this spot on the list, and it might not be one that ever moves up higher because I don't know how many times I'm going to go back to it, which is really my only criticism of it, is you are left with a game you can play forever, and that game is fun if you're wanting to just play a one-off game with someone. Believe me, I've done it once and it was still fun, but it does lose a little bit of the fact that like so much of what we enjoyed was seeing how many cool ways this game was going to evolve and change and make our strategies adapt with the same people you're playing with consistently. I absolutely adore this game. I'm crossing my fingers and toes that because of the success, I know there's a roll and write version coming out, but I would absolutely love to see them revisit this and do sort of a full-on sequel with just another 24 modes with different ideas. Maybe it's the same genre, maybe it's a different genre. I don't know. I just loved it so much that I want more of it, but really my only option then is to buy another copy and just do the whole campaign with someone else. Right. And I'll know.
And you still have a couple extra boards in that one, doesn't it?
For sure, that's true.
You don't have to buy a new copy.
I could do another, but I'd be limited to just doing 2 players.
Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah,
and I already know all the secrets, so it loses a little bit of that.
True.
But it's so hard to explain why it's so good because it's such a simple game. It's just that it's simple elements that evolve at just the right pace as you play. So all of a sudden you think you have a grasp on, and they say, well, but now imagine that you have this mechanic, and it's like, you got that, now put this sticker on the board, and now you have this mechanic. But it all comes back to the same thing of just flip over a card and place that tile on your board. And yet the way you score, the way that you do work within those confines changes every game, and I just absolutely love it. We've had such a great time playing this. I'm expecting to see it on your list, I think. Maybe not. Oh man, it's not going to be on your list. Oh,
sorry to say.
That's the first time I've sworn on camera.
I think so.
I'm gonna have to bleep a swear for the first time. Not that, like, I'm sure most of the people who watch are adults, but
anyways, it's the family channel.
Yeah, of course. for the families, I got to bleep it now. But anyways, My City is a great game, and like I said, it probably won't ever climb on this list because of the fact that I'm not going back to very often, but at least for this year, this is the spot it gets, and I think it deserves it.
That's fair, and honestly, these types of games are really tough for me to place on lists, like legacy games, campaign games, because of that fact. Is like, how long is it going to stay? Because if I can't go back to it, I'm placing it based on the memory of the game, and I absolutely loved playing it. Some of the plays I enjoyed less than others, and that might be why it doesn't quite crack my top 50.
Yeah.
But in terms of when we both found, I think you found out about it first, when you told me there was a Reiner Knizia Polyomino Legacy game,
yeah.
I didn't have that high expectations because I was like, how good could this be? And I think he absolutely crushed. Like, he did it about as well as this type of game could be done, I think. So, highly recommend it. Excellent game. All right, number 22 on my list is a game that I went back and forth on quite a bit in terms of where some points I thought it should be higher, some points I thought it should be lower. I eventually settled on number 22 for Biblios. Okay. This is a game that is a lot of fun. The difficulty of the decisions in this game is just agonizing. There's a lot of kind of mind games. It's a two-phase game where you're basically drafting cards and deciding which ones are going to go. One goes into an auction, other ones go up for grabs for other players, and one of them you keep in your hand. So you're always going to have some secret information that other players don't know in terms of what's in your hand and the card you put in the auction, and then you're going to see cards that other players take. So there's a bit of a memory game where you want to remember, what did I put in the auction? What did other players take? And there's cards of 5 different colors for these dice that come out, and basically the die values will change. And then in the second phase, you're basically doing an auction to buy off all those cards that came up in the auction. So you don't know what to expect when the auction phase comes up. So you don't know how much should you be bidding. Should you save money for later? Are you going to hold back too much money and then you regret later not spending and now you didn't get enough cards to score points for this die color? It's got so much going on, and I think it's one of those games that really surprised both of us at how much we enjoyed it. The first time you showed me, I was like, why did I not know about this game? And why have I not played this more? Since we've played it more and more, I've cooled on it only a little bit because I think there's a couple things. First off, the theme is just like the whole like monks and whatever theme just feels so like random and detached. Like they did just release one called For the King and Me or something. Yeah. I'm kind of curious to see if that addresses that and makes me a little more into the game for that reason. And it could be a game that climbs more or goes lower, but part of the memory aspect too is like I sometimes get frustrated after it, like the cards I didn't remember. I'm like, rather, it's a game that I want to be talking to people throughout because I want to be doing the trash talking and like, but then the more I talk to people, the less I remember what the cards are. So then I'm like, if I want to do better, I have to pay more attention to what I did. And there's these little weird things about it, but it's such a fun game. I never get tired of it. I would play Biblios any day. I'll definitely buy my own copy at some point. It's such a good game, and I fully expect it to be higher on your list.
You are correct.
And it's one of my favorite games on your shelf for sure. Yeah,
I'll talk about it later, but I love Biblios. That's what I'll just say for now.
Yeah, excellent game.
Yeah. Okay, so the number 21 on my list, last one for this video, I'm gonna ask for a little bit of flexibility on, and you'll see why in a second. And that is because it is The Crew. And the flexibility I'm asking for is because there's 2 versions of The Crew right now. There's no way I'm just going to include them both. I really think either version can slot in here. I would personally put Mission Deep Sea at this point on here, but I also think that a good starting point for many people would be the Quest for Planet 9. I think either one functions in this spot. I just think it's going to come down to preference and like the complexity you're looking for.
And you played the Planet 9 one more, right?
Yes, so far, for sure. But The Crew, just in general, is just such a phenomenal trick-taking game. It is my favorite trick-taking game by far. And I'm new to the trick-taking genre, I would say, but it's so much fun because it's cooperative and because it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle every single turn that you almost have a unique puzzle every single time you play because you might never have that exact combination, and even more so with Mission Deep Sea. There's so many cards, and the combinations you get out, you might never have that combination come out again, and no one else might have ever experienced that aside from a one group here or there. So you have this unique puzzle you got to figure out how to accomplish with different personalities every single time based on how is everyone going to interpret what cards they have in their hand and what combination you get. It's just, there's so much variety because of that it's a game that even though it only has X number of missions, it's not a legacy game where, when you're done the missions, you won't want to come back to it.
You don't have to modify the game.
No, I could come back to this and do the 50 missions in a row with different groups over and over again, or with the same groups, and you're never coming back for the story. If you think you're not going to play this game for the story, it's nice flavor for sure, but you're just playing to see how well you can get yourself out of situations that you really don't think, how can we possibly beat this now? And yet you do, and it's some of the most accomplished I've ever felt playing a game, being like, I did not think we were going to pull that off, and then suddenly you do, and you just feel on top of the world because of it. Very small game, very affordable, very fun. I think it strikes so many of the right boxes in terms of affordability and in terms of how much value you get out of it and how much fun you have playing it, that I understand why it's so popular now that I've played it as much as I have. And I would highly recommend that if you are a fan of it already, get Mission Deep Sea, because the complexity in the task cards takes it to the next level, and it is my favorite version of it now for sure.
Nice. I'll have more to say about this another time.
Oh wow! I thought I was gonna have it higher than you, and then I thought maybe it wasn't gonna be on your list. So I'm very impressed that it is higher.
It's quite high up on my list.
Amazing.
It's an
I'm very
incredible
glad.
game.
Yeah.
Number 21 on my list, the last one to close out this video, is Bonanza. This is an incredible Uwe Rosenberg game. It's the highest ranked negotiation game on my list. A game that I was late to the party on. I think this originally came out in the late 90s or something, early 2000. I can't remember exactly. Maybe it was 95, I think, same year as Catan or something. Such a good game, so simple, does things that I haven't seen in other games with the order of the cards in your hand, where when you draw a card, it goes to the back of your hand, and you cannot rearrange the order of the cards, and at the start of your turn, you have to plant the bean that's at the front of your hand, and you can also plant the second one, so you're trying to maximize planting as many beans as you can, but you don't want to plant beans you don't want, because you have limited spaces, limited bean fields to plant them on, and you want to get more beans of the same type to maximize your scoring, so you're kind of trying to push your luck and think, how long do I hold on to this? Can I make room for this? And because you're turning over bean cards every round for other players to see, you have to try and offload them. And the game has gone through rules changes, so I'm talking about the most recent edition, but you have to try and offload beans you don't want, and sometimes they might be beans that benefit someone else, so you're trying to get money. You're like, I'll trade you this for this, and they're like, what are you talking about? You should be giving me extra stuff. If you take that bean, you're not going to want to plant that. That does you harm. And you're like, no. They're like, you're trying to spin something as a deal for someone else when it really isn't. You know that you need to get rid of it. So I love the negotiation aspect of this game. I know it's a very divisive game and that a lot of people say it falls flat with their group, or people have said, I played this game with my parents and it wasn't all that fun or whatever. You have to have people that kind of really buy into the negotiation aspect and are willing to make these really interesting deals, whether it's short-term or long-term. I just feel like I've been lucky enough to play this with the right people in the right settings. I will say, because I have a feeling you're just waiting to say it over there.
Yeah.
One time we played this game. I had only played at first the 3-player version for the first however many games, and then I played it with 4 once. And I set the game up wrong where I didn't remove certain beans. We basically ended up playing the game, I think, 3 rules wrong with the amount of bean fields we had, the bean types that were in the deck, and how many times you go through the deck. So the game was too long, and there was different but it was at the end of the game, I was like, I got this one rule wrong. I'm so sorry. And then I kept reading the rules. I'm like, I got another rule wrong. I got another rule. And I just felt so bad the whole night, but everyone kept saying, it was still awesome. It was still awesome. It's a game that I will never get rid of. Still stands to this day as an incredible, it's Uwe Rosenberg's simplest game I've played, maybe along with Nova Luna in terms of rules, but there's so much fun player interaction out of it. I just love how social it is, and the fact that it goes up to 7 players is a huge plus.
Yeah.
This is one I will be playing for years to come, and I wish I had discovered this earlier in the hobby or given it a chance. And for people who don't give it a chance, maybe I know some people say they don't really like the artwork. I think there's been announced a new version they're coming out with updated artwork, so that might be... I'm glad because it's going to hopefully pull more people into the game to give it a chance. But Bonanza, I love this game. Great game.
I should mention at some point in 2022 we're going to do a video about the games that we've played wrong rules on and talk about, because there's some pretty funny moments to talk about. That was one of them. I've only played it a few times. I've really enjoyed it. It's on my list because I just haven't played it enough, and it's been too long between plays. But the hand management and the negotiation, by far, is my favorite part of it.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, it's such a great game.
Yeah. And that is the third video. So we have 20 games left. There's 2 videos left. Make sure you stick around on our channel, subscribe so you don't miss it, and you'll find out what our top 20 games of all time are. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, that's everything. Thanks so much for watching, guys.
See you next time.
See ya.